Well, we left off at verse 17, so today we start at verse 18 in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 1. I gave a little bit of intro to Matthew before, talking about how he was a tax collector, and that the book of Matthew is arranged around 5 great teachings of Jesus, 5 discourses of Jesus. That's very interesting because Matthew, being Jewish, would value the first 5 books of the Old Testament, the Torah, the law of God. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. And Matthew, writing to a Jewish audience, that was his primary folks that he was writing to. I think it's fascinating that he arranged his entire gospel, not so much around the events of Jesus or the timing of Jesus, but 5 great teachings of Jesus, echoing the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. How Jewish can you get? Matthew is writing to his fellow Jews to explain to them that as the great I Am had once made a promise, he's keeping it. And so we pick up in verse 18. Matthew's Gospel, chapter 1, verse 18. This is the New International Version. This is how the birth of Jesus the Messiah came about. His mother Mary was pledged to be married to Joseph, but before they came together, she was found to be pregnant by the Holy Spirit. Because Joseph, her husband, was faithful to the law and yet did not want to expose her to public disgrace, he had in mind to divorce her quietly. But after he had considered this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, "Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary home as your wife, because what is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins." All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had said through the prophet. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. When Joseph woke up, he did what the angel of the Lord had commanded him, and he took Mary home as his wife. But he did not consummate their marriage until she gave birth to a son, and he gave him the name Jesus. Jesus. Yeshua is the Hebrew word. We call it Joshua in the Old Testament. In Greek, it's Isu, but it means the same thing. The one who saves. Jesus, the one who saves. Imagine the situation where your very young wife that you are betrothed to. In those days, a betroth was like, we call it an engagement today, but it was a legal ceremony. It legally bound you together. So you were going to be married. And the only way you could break that was you actually had to get a divorce. But if the wife was found to be unfaithful, according to Jewish law, she was to be accused publicly, and then she was to be stoned to death, and because she was an adulteress. Joseph discovers that she is pregnant. Now, I can't even begin to imagine how the family taken this, because, here's their little girl, and about to get married. They're kind of happy about that, and then she says, "Oh, by the way, I'm pregnant, and by the way, God got me pregnant." Yeah, I can imagine that goes over well. That's like, bad enough that you're pregnant before marriage. It's worse that you're blaming God for this, because now that's considered heresy and blasphemy. So that's the circumstances. Not easy to take. Joseph sees this and just thinks, well, maybe we should just dispose of this quietly. But then God intervenes. God shows up. And when God shows up, everything changes. And isn't that true in life? When God shows up, everything changes. Things that look impossible, embarrassing, humiliating, God has a way of redeeming, doesn't he? No wonder his name is Jesus, the one who saves. We'll pick up in chapter 2 next time.